And welcome to Shirley Ware from the Menopause Chicks to the Sexy Aging podcast today. How are you going, Shirley?
Hi, Tracy. I'm great. Thank you.
I thought it would be really cool to catch up with someone that has a online resource called the Menopause Chicks. I'm like, that's a lady I want to hang out with.
Yeah, do you know what a menopause chick is? I always think a menopause chick is someone who's like smart and savvy and likes to consume their information online.
Yeah, well, that's what's happening now. So I think we've become a little bit smarter and savvier when it comes to the online, resources because for a lot of us around the world, and we've probably gone straight into this conversation right now, a lot of us around the world have been like, as you go through the menopause symptoms, there isn't like resources out there or even friends that can help you out, tell you what's going on. So, the 2 a.m. get up in the middle of the night, Dr. Google, and then you come up against really fantastic amazing sites like the menopauseChicks.com. Just a little push out there. Shirley, you are based in British Columbia, is that right?
I am. I'm in Vancouver.
Beautiful. It's on my bucket list. Canada, I haven't been to Canada yet, but some of my favorite people are Canadian. I think I've
Come to
mentioned,
Canada.
come to Canada, come to New Zealand. I think you'd
I
find
will.
it's
I
much the
will.
same.
Yes, I think so.
But one of the really cool things that I found out about you when I was stalking you was you have this fabulous TED talk. Um, it's it's very cool, and I just from a personal perspective, you're standing up there, you're telling it like it is, and I thought this is a woman that I need to know. And so that was my journey into finding, what you do in the
Really?
world. Yeah. So I just recommend anybody that wants to find out a real tell it like it is perspective on the amazing third age or this change of life that hits us like a ton of bricks, but then can also take you off into an amazing opportunity. Check out Shirley Ware on TED Talks X.
Thank
Yes, I'll
you.
put it in the show notes. Shirley, I'm going to back it down, and I'd really like to give you the opportunity to tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you come to set up the resources to support women going through this transition? And you've been around for a while, so I think maybe a decade. But look at you, fabulous and sexy. Like,
I have been doing this for a while. I can't believe I started Menopause Chicks 9 years ago, and it's been my full-time job for the last 5 years. So I'm 54 years old. I reached menopause at age 49. So that's 12 consecutive months without a period. But I probably started my research around age 40, 41. I did never in my wildest dreams did I think I was going to grow up and become a menopause chick. That wasn't that wasn't my life's plan.
it was meant to
I,
be. It was meant to be.
I had a 30-year career in marketing and communications, and I just saw an opportunity when I got up in the middle of the night and started turning to Dr. Google for answers to questions around sleep deprivation and mood changes and changes to bleeding and all those things that happen. It was one of those things that I was aware of. Certainly wasn't 100% in the dark, but I had made this giant assumption that when it came time for me to embrace this learning, that the answer was out there somewhere. It was just something I hadn't learned about yet, which is, like most of us, right? If you've never installed a skylight in your house, then you're going to go on YouTube and you're going to learn how to do that when the time comes. And this was different. I turned to Dr. Google and I just couldn't find a reputable, verified answers that sat well with me, that kind of provided that here's the map, here's the journey, here's what you need to do. And I couldn't find a community. And so that was what really led me to, at the time, start a blog because everyone was blogging. And then it was about 4 years later when everybody was starting Facebook groups. And I wanted to start a private group because I had done a little bit of research that told me that women, A, have a lot of questions about their midlife health. 77% of women have questions about their midlife health. And 70% of women told me that they didn't have anyone to talk to. And so that was the birth of what is now the Menopause Chicks community on Facebook. And we have 35,000 members in there. They're very active. They have like about an 83% active rate every month. Lots of questions. All of the answers come to our members through verified health resources. So the experts are designated health professionals. The research has been verified. And that for me, I mean, I kind of always have created things in my life that I want, right? That was really important because you can go down so many rabbit holes, as you know, when you do like to consume your information online, but you don't actually have your favorite verified bookmarks.
Yeah, so thank you so much for setting that up because I have also seen the private Facebook page, and I think I'm probably like a fan or a friend or a user in about 10 of them right now. But I think a lot of that is just my personal research, and which kind of it tells you back to yourself that whatever you're doing, whatever information you're putting out there, and whatever community you're building, it's helping more and more people. Okay,
Um,
so Shirley, one of the things that I really like to ask any of the guests, and it just really makes it much more personable between those that are listening, is that we really are going through this experience, or in your case, you are now at the end of it. Going back to the toughest symptom for you. Well, yeah, okay. Well, menopause, you're still going through the changes, right? But like when you're going through perimenopause and you're still trying to figure out, exactly what's going on. What was some of the toughest moments for you?
Sure, that's a great question. So let's back up and just clarify definitions for starters. So, perimenopause is the phase of life leading up to menopause, and it's a term that was only coined in 1996. So it's relatively new. And so often I do get asked about menopause symptoms, quote unquote, and really what started this journey for me was perimenopause, which is the phase of life defined by age and not by symptoms and not by suffering. And I think that's really important for your listeners to understand because, you can sail through perimenopause if you can keep your hormones balanced and really prioritize your health. For me, however, I showed up in my doctor's office because I was really concerned about brain fog. I was trying to run a business, raise two small kids, look after my aging mother. You all know this story, right? And I was burnt out and I had brain fog, but I actually was questioning whether or not it was the beginning of dementia. So that was like probably one of my number one concerns. I had sleep deprivation. Well, did the sleep deprivation lead to the brain fog? Maybe, right? And I had mood changes that I had never experienced before. I had PMS that I had never experienced before. And I even had moments of rage with my kids. And that was scaring me a lot. And so I really was curious to figure it out and to learn more. Menopause is one day. It's just one day. It's the 12-month anniversary after we haven't had a period for 12 consecutive months. And then postmenopause is every day for the rest of your life. And it's important not to leave the conversation there. It's not like you ever get through it or over it. That's a big myth and misconception. Postmenopause, what happens in postmenopause after our hormones have been fluctuating, sometimes wildly, in perimenopause, in postmenopause, our estrogen goes for a deep decline. So even women who will come to my community and they'll say things like, oh, it's been no problem for me. I've sailed through. Definitely, I believe them. And then they may reach 51, 52, 54 and start being really surprised and taken aback by some of the things that are happening in their body because estrogen is our juicy hormone and it's responsible for keeping our eyes and our mouth and our joints and our vaginas moist. And when that declines, about 80% of women will experience vaginal dryness. So it's really important, if we can get ahead of that curve and do some preventative conversations and learning. But it's also important for women to know that that's not a foregone conclusion. It's not the end of the end. It's just an opportunity for us to take a time out and say, oh boy, now it's time to invest in my health.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that for us, Shirley, like the three stages, because even for myself, I am going through the journey. And obviously, I'm all up in my head about perimenopause because that's
Yeah.
my journey right now. And I haven't yet had the 12 months without
Yeah.
a period. So I would say my last period was maybe 4 months ago. And
Okay.
that's been the stutter for the last
it's
couple of
a good word.
years. Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, I'll get, and it's light spotting, and then it's, raging hormones, and that's only sort of like every 4 to 6 months, and it's been like that like the last 3 years. So I'm
Yeah.
really in that whole perimenopause thing. And so when you explain, hey, look, and then this happens, and then this happens, that's really cool. Like, I haven't yet had that conversation. So thank you so much for bringing that to the podcast. I think that's an important thing. And you're right about the menopause or the postmenopause, the drop in estrogen and all the things that start to kick in. What we want to do is just let people know it's not the end. You haven't fallen off the cliff. But here's just what you need
No.
to know. And there's a ton of things you can do, and there's more and more science that is sort of coming to the foreground about this. It's been a bit freaking slow, to be honest,
It's
but
been a bit
it's
slow. Yeah.
but for the two of us, having these open conversations, the forums, the resources and stuff, it's getting more exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, one of the
Yeah,
reasons I think that it's been slow is lack of conversation. Like, so
yeah,
that's what I applaud you and your podcast and your listeners for tuning in too, because, the things that we don't talk about actually are hurting or potentially causing harm to our bodies. So that's really important. And the other thing is that, we all work within a traditional medical system, no matter what country you're listening from. We have sort of this traditional model of healthcare, and often that model rewards patients, women, for going to the doctor when something is wrong, but doesn't reward us for going to the doctor before something is wrong.
yeah, yeah. And having that open conversation and sort of saying,
Yeah.
hey, look, I'm at this stage of my life. I have noticed a few things, and what can you tell me about what's going on? It's actually happening the other way.
Yeah, it happens the other way.
Yeah, I mean that was my story. Anyone that sort of heard me go on about it is about my journey to access HRT. So, and how difficult that was as a woman in New Zealand, and the health system, which is an amazing health system, to be
Yeah.
honest. But the fact that
Yeah.
I couldn't have my doctors say, hey, look, okay, well, it looks like you're a really good candidate. She was like, I have no idea what's,
Same in
what,
Canada.
why you're asking me for this, because
Yeah.
you seem healthy enough. I'm like, uh, life could be better.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's an interesting conversation. Maybe it's a whole other podcast, but
Yeah.
health health professionals telling their patients you seem fine when they have just showed up expressing health concerns and expressing health goals, there's a gap. That's
Yeah.
an inequality in our healthcare.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You mentioned vaginal dryness, and we talk about how women don't speak of it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm totally open to taking things out of the closet, taking them off the shelf, putting them out there. We actually did a podcast episode with one of my fantastic guests in Australia, and it was talking about the frequency of this one of these symptoms,
Yep.
and what you can do about it. But
Definitely.
apparently it's only 1 in 10 women that actually have vaginal dryness will even mention it to their GP. That's a lot of
Oh,
ladies going,
yeah.
that's a lot of people walking around like freaking uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's quite alarming, some of the stories that I have heard since the vaginal dryness conversation has been cracked open at Menopause Chicks. You might be interested to know, we've already mentioned that vaginal dryness is common in post-menopause,
Yeah.
but it's not the only reason for vaginal dryness. One of the most common culprits is the birth control pill, and that can
Oh,
affect
wow.
women at any age. So you talk about women walking around feeling uncomfortable, and think about how ironic it is that we're putting women on birth control pill and then they experience vaginal dryness. Like, it blows my mind. And the second common culprit is women who overuse panty liners or absorbent pads can also experience vulva and vaginal dryness. And that makes sense if you think about how an absorbent pad is like drawing the moisture out of your skin. If you wore a band-aid on your arm all
Yeah.
day, every day, it would dry out as well. So it totally makes sense. But again, it's just not a common conversation that's happening yet.
Wow, I am learning so much from you right now. It's like, wow, those are, I think I've sort of seen posts and little tidbits of information as I'm kind of journeying through this. But thank you for bringing that to light. And I hope that someone hears this and goes, okay, that's a change for me. That's something I'm going to make a change to now. Hey, Shirley, we both have teenage daughters, and one of the
Yes.
things I was thinking of, and we've kind of spoken of this before, is isn't it really interesting that they are so comfortable having a talk or mentioning, hey, I've got my period today, don't talk to me, I'm feeling this, I'm uncomfortable, has anybody got any Panadol? Um, in front of everyone, the whole family, and yet at the other end, which is the bookend of the reproductive cycle, it's not the same for us. And both of us have spoken about that before. So yeah,
Yeah.
how are things with your daughter? Do you get the
Yeah,
same
I,
thing?
I
Yeah,
interviewed my daughter just a couple of weeks ago, and I asked her, that very question of, do you think it's going to be different for you and your friends? My daughter's 18, as you reach your 30s, 40s, and beyond. And she compared it a little bit to conversations around mental health. And she said, that her and her friends have grown up having open, frank conversations about mental health, about sexual health. And I think that is going to serve them well.
yeah,
They're also very smart and savvy. And I think that, what we're doing, the work that we're doing now might be cracking open the conversation. I really think that it's our daughters that are actually going to change the conversation. So
yeah. Well, I think
I'm
that's so
so
exciting.
optimistic,
Yeah,
so optimistic about the future.
yeah. I feel that too. I think it's quite funny that in one household you've got a child, our child is, has been going through puberty a couple of years, and at the other end you've got mum going through, their change as well, and the both of us having our conversations at the same time. My daughter actually told me that a lot of her friends' mums listen to the podcast.
Oh, good. That's
So it's good.
amazing. But
It's
you've
good,
just
right?
identified, in terms of the history of the world, you've identified a relatively new phenomenon, because our bodies were originally designed to have babies at a much earlier age than society is embracing at this point. So that age where you've got the teenagers in the house, had we had our babies at 18, 19, and 20, that wouldn't have been the case. So I think it's really interesting. And then the other thing is that, you know, our bodies women used to die at 50.
Yeah.
Like 100 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation because I wouldn't be here. I'm
Yeah.
54. But the reality now is that women will live to be 85 to 100. I'm shooting for 100 if everything is working the way it's supposed to. But evolution hasn't caught up. So we end up asking our bodies to do the exact same jobs they used to do in our
Mm.
20s, 30s, and 40s for 3 to 5 more decades.
Yeah.
We're like, hey, brain, do this. Hey, heart. Hey, vagina, be the
Yeah.
way that you always were. And yet they don't have the same ingredients. So that's, definitely a case study for you when you're going and talking to your health team about the benefits of hormone therapy and how to invest in
Yeah.
your health.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that is the journey that I'm on right now because the whole beginning of my journey, how I got into this was it was about longevity. It was about
Yes.
how do I live my best life up until 90, you know? And then I fell into the rabbit hole of, but what's happening today that's affecting how I can achieve that. So it
Yeah,
is really just comes down to all over health, like everything we need to do to stay as healthy as we can for the
for
future that we
sure.
want. And this is just a moment in time that we need to address, but there wasn't enough information about it. So it's really good that we get to catch up about this. You've also written a book, Shirley.
Did.
Do you want to tell us about your book? Because I often promote the books that are written by so many of the women on the podcast. So can you tell us about your book?
So 3 years ago, I wrote a book called Mokita. It's how to navigate perimenopause with confidence and ease. I stole the word Mokita, or the word found me, I should say. It's from Papua New Guinea, and it means the truth we all know, but choose not to
To
speak
speak.
of.
Yes, I love that.
So, right, it's not a
Mm.
myth or a misconception, although the book does break down a lot of the most common myths and misconceptions, because I do believe that in order for women to learn about their health, they first must unlearn
Yes.
what they may have inherited from previous generations or from media or even from the medical community. So the first half of Mokita is my narrative, a lot of information from my research over the last 9 years. And the second half of Mokita really attempts to empower women to build their own midlife health team. So you might want to work with your family doctor. We have a chapter from a family doctor, but we also have chapters from a naturopath, from an acupuncturist, a pelvic floor expert, a pharmacist. And it really helps to open up our minds to the concept of, wait a second, if I was building a house, I would have more than one plumber doing the job for me. So when I'm looking after my health, it's important that I draw in the professionals who can help me now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll be posting that up onto the social site so that people can access your book as well. So thank you so much, Shirley. Um, yeah, wow, that was awesome. A good chat. You've given me so much food for thought, and I'm really excited for when this episode comes out on the
Awesome.
podcast. And stay safe, stay well.
You too. Great to chat with you.
Good to talk to you too.
Thank you.